Well, I guess it's time to start. It's Monday morning. We've done it again, folks. We've lived through the weekend, and today happy to have you here. We're happy to have you here because if you're working for government, you got the day off. If you're working for a big private entity, you probably have a day off. If you're working for yourself, you probably have a lot to do today because it's a catch-up day. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy. It's Monday, January 15th, and 2024's electoral season begins in a big way tonight in Iowa. The Iowa caucuses will take place. I guess they haven't been canceled for weather-related reasons. Brutal cold grips the Midwest, and apparently there are those who are saying, "I'd rather stay home than play with the fate of the republic." I'm hoping folks come out. I'm very curious to see what will happen. Mike and I were talking a little bit beforehand. Mike, you expect maybe some surprise results tomorrow morning.
I don't know to what degree I expect the surprise results, but I was telling you that C-SPAN's, I think Washington Journal, whatever they call it, put out a poll on X, and curiously enough, they did not name Vivek within the listed candidates that you would expect. So you had Trump, you had DeSantis, and you had Haley. And I'll see as you continue talking, Norm, if I can actually find the poll so I can pull it up. But what I recall from that poll, seeing that as early as this morning, is that it was basically asking where your support would lie. 20-something% was for Trump. Low single digit percentages were for DeSantis and Haley, respectively. And then they listed a category known as others. And did not call out
include undecided, or were these people who had made decisions?
Well, other candidates, others meaning like a class of candidates. So Trump, DeSantis, Haley, others, and others commands right now in excess of 70% of that poll, which is thousands and thousands and thousands of votes. I say that only to say that Vivek appears to be getting that Ron Paul treatment. No one in their right mind is considering DeSantis or Haley. No one is also disputing Trump's dominance. I think you and I agree on that. With respect to carrying the state. But I do think that the surprise tomorrow is going to be Vivek's efforts there on the ground in Iowa through almost 400 campaign events. And even with this weird sort of in the last 36 hours, some sort of, online detraction from him in the wake of Trump actually acknowledging Vivek rather curiously in the late hours before the caucus begins. So I don't know. I don't know what to expect on the front of Vivek. I just know that I'm starting to see that not only is the online and political left establishment media ignoring his presence, but also that there is a very willing political right that does not want to see his name anywhere near Trump either.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of political polling in general. I remember years ago getting a call from a marketing company or a pollster, and it had to do with utility rates in New England or something. And so the guy said, "Do you have a few minutes to take a poll?" And I said, "No, but I'll do it for you. What's the topic?" And he told me. I said, "Fine, nationalize it all." That's my answer to every question. But and then he answered me the first question, and I said, "Nationalize it." He asked me the second question, nationalize it, and then I hung up on him. I wasn't taking the poll seriously. I wasn't accountable. I was just, excuse the language, but sport fornicating with the individual. And you kind of wonder about that with respect to the polls. I think for me, the great unknown is how Iowa caucus attendees actually feel about Donald Trump. I think for my purposes, I finally figured out what his appeal is to me. Insouciance, just indifference to what others think about him, indifference to the left, indifference to the right. It's just sort of this is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. Get out of my way. And the other appeal for me, at least with Trump, is he doesn't view the state government, that is, as a focus of the good life. And I think that his insouciance, his not giving a damn, his not caring, extends broadly to those who think not only do they have the right questions, do they know what questions to ask, they have the correct answers to those questions. And thus, we're going to create a better world through DEI. Thus, we're going to create a better world through open borders. Thus, we're going to create a better world through robust international commitments to some global order of some sort or another. And, Trump's view is essentially pragmatic. Those who dislike him will say narcissistic. But I think it's more than that, because millions of Americans wouldn't be drawn to him if he was just a narcissistic saying, give me another cheeseburger, hold the mayo. Donald Trump reflects a sense of frustration, and he's a go to candidate for many people who think the system isn't working for them and who want government to get out of the way. That's a classic motif in American politics. But in Iowa, and with respect to the polls, a lot of people, you can be frustrated about the world that we live in. You can have a sort of FU attitude toward those who think they know best and their prescriptions for you to live a better life. You can have all of that, but still not be, and you can, and it's fun to tell off a pollster. But when you sit with your neighbors and engage in the sort of give and take that goes on in a caucus, I think we get a better sense of the commitments that people are willing to make in public. And so Donald Trump is almost a forbidden pleasure for many people this year. He's got so many legal difficulties, and we'll talk about Fat Fanny in a moment. But Fannie Williams, Jack Smith, the Judge and Gorin treatment, and he's always in the headlines these days, but for his legal problems. The press has decided they're not going to give him the free publicity that he had in 2016, and he doesn't command the stage in the way that a sitting president does, as he did in 2020. And so now he's largely ignored, but yet his polling numbers are high. Does that reflect real and genuine loyalty, or does it reflect something else? And Mike, the poll results that you showed the other moments ago suggests that we could be in for a surprise tomorrow morning. If 20% of those polled are supporting Trump and single-digit percentages are supporting Haley and DeSantis, and there's roughly 70% of people who support other, we could wake up tomorrow with a new Republican leader in the Republican primary.
Right. I wouldn't go that far.
I don't expect we will.
Right. I wouldn't go that far. I'm just because it's a C-SPAN poll. It's on X and it's open to anyone who views the tweet. So essentially, we're talking about those who would view that tweet and say whether they like any of the options listed or not. Right. So plenty of Democrats outside the state of Iowa would look at that and say others instinctively. So I understand that there are sort of difficulties with interpreting that to be meaningful beyond, or instructive of a very specific point. But I am saying that in the absence of even mentioning Vivek's name, we shouldn't be surprised. And here's what my issue is, I think, right now with Vivek, because, there are those in our chat now and those who have been following us for a while. And then also those who we have hosted on the show, namely Laura Loomer, who have kind of repositioned themselves with respect to Vivek in very recent minutes and hours, right, to be much more divisive and much more aggressive with respect to defense of Trump, advocacy of Trump, as opposed to Vivek. Here's my issue. Anyone that I am still welcome to any legitimate criticism of Vivek's record heretofore. But what I'm gathering, Norm, from the political right, which I think is really troubling and probably more broadly applicable to something that is affecting the political right beyond this election, but and well into the future, is this sort of shadow boxing with non-existent facts or circumstances, right? It is this deeply cynical suspicion that anyone who says certain things is not to be trusted if they say them too well, if they have certain success, if they arrive on the scene randomly. Lest we forget, Donald Trump was not a serious candidate ahead of the 2016 election. But I'm finding it increasingly difficult to spar with anybody who is categorically against Vivek but staunchly pro-Trump. And this is not an anti-Trump stance, Norm. I want to be very clear. I think I don't live in that binary. I think that
I hear you.
both, right? You know that about me. But what I'm starting to notice is that in the absence of any real legitimate detraction to be made from Vivek, and I'm talking about legitimate not being he looks like Obama or he speaks like Obama or he has some weird tie to Soros fund, all these like weird things that have been either debunked or just sort of imagined, that there is this deeply held cynicism and suspicion of who he is. And that's being gripped really tightly as like a legitimate counter argument or reason to say, we can't have him anywhere around here. When what he's saying out loud and what he's saying directly into the camera and unscripted almost and over and over and over with an endurance and stamina that we've never seen before out of a candidate. I mean, almost 400 events in Iowa as a no one, self-funding his campaign like this. It's amazing to me that in an era when the political right is under such scrutiny, has so many legitimate and established enemies in the political left from the mainstream media and otherwise, that we would look a gift horse in the mouth like Vivek and say, no, we're going to spit on you and you're not legit because we can't trust you for whatever reason we can't articulate, but just be advised that it's Trump and you need to get out of here, right? We're not even going to list you on these polls or even in these news and headlines. It's crazy to me.
Well, it's a crazy world out there. Let's see what happens. I mean, right now, if I'm in a polling place, I'd still pull the lever for Trump because of his insouciance, because he doesn't believe that people have some sort of inborn right to declare that they know what the right questions are, and only they have the correct
Hold on,
answer.
one more thing, and I won't get caught on this.
My
I
problem.
won't get caught on this, but Jackson Barrett says, debunked by whom? This is the issue. What is to be debunked? You can't imagine a problem and then say, oh, he hasn't debunked this imagined problem. State the problem clearly, and then we can address it. That's my issue. Stop imagining things and then making them appear to be real. It's not legitimate criticism. Anyway, sorry, I'm off it.
Hey, let's move on. Fani Willis says you're a racist. Oh, that's right. You're a racist if you question the propriety of Fani Willis picking a boyfriend to receive a state contract to prosecute Trump and letting that boyfriend collect nearly $750,000 from Georgia taxpayers and take her on a vacation while she parades around the country as the savior of the republic. What am I talking about? Last week, one of the co-defendants in the Georgia prosecution, I believe it. Oh, I can't recall the name, and I've got my notes, and I can't. Mike Roman. Mike Roman's lawyer disclosed that Fani Willis appointed Nathan Wade together with two others to serve as special counsel to the state of Georgia in its RICO prosecution of Donald Trump. At about the same time she appointed him, he filed for divorce, and thereafter he collected handsome money, big money from the state of Georgia, and she is his squeeze, or he is her his squeeze. One, they are squeezees to one another, and this raises questions about the propriety of what Fani's doing. I mean, is she double dipping? Is she saying to the people of Georgia, pay for my playmate while I posture for the national press as the savior of the republic? There'll be a hearing sometime soon, maybe later this month, certainly no later than next month, in front of Judge Scott McAfee. I believe he sits in Atlanta. And McAfee will answer publicly, or seek to get answers publicly, to questions about what's going on in Georgia. But here's what I don't think was going on. I don't think Fani Willis is being picked on because she's black. Fani, on the eve of Martin Luther King's birthday, and today is Martin Luther King Day, went to the Big Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church, I think in Atlanta, and she said, folks, I'm not perfect. I'm flawed and I'm imperfect. And, obviously this is a reference to Martin Luther King, who was a notorious womanizer. J. Edgar Hoover engaged in some shameful conduct with respect to the tracking of Martin Luther King, including recording snippets of King with a mistress and then sending them on a I guess would be a tape recording to King's home where his wife received them. And then even suggesting at various points that King could make his life easier for everyone involved if he would just kill himself. Obviously, this is a dark chapter in American history, and that various Senate and House committee reports shed light on Hoover's shenanigans. But for Fani to drape herself rather in the prosecution and persecution of Martin Luther King and say, they're only picking on me because I share infidelity. I share the virtue of infidelity with Saint Martin is just ridiculous, Fani. I mean, at the risk of being profane, it's all pink on the inside, babe. And if you're double dipping for your secret pleasures and paying for it out of the public trial, I think the public has a right to know that. And for you to drape yourself in race as a defense is shameful. And you've become now not simply a prominent black politician, but you've become a professional black politician. And playing the race card in these circumstances is shameful. I don't think that this is a disqualifying event for Fani. In other words, even if all of the allegations are true, Fani picked a boyfriend to receive money from the state of Georgia to prosecute Donald Trump. And she either directly or indirectly benefits from the money that boyfriend is receiving. If um, I don't think that disqualifies her from the case. Maury, Maury's more. Maury. I know a little bit more about Maury. Maury was in touch with me the other day, and Maury is proving their chops. I'm not even going to reveal Maury's gender because it's a gender neutral name. Maury is revealing their chops. MLK was killed at a motel, and Fani Willis killed her career at one. Nice job, Maury. We don't know that she killed her career yet. But I do know that her tap dancing on the or playing the race card, and tap dancing on Martin Luther King's grave on his anniversary, and trying to drape herself in the mantle of his faults so that she could somehow get a rebound blessing. They picked on Martin and they're picking on me. It doesn't work, Fani.
How condescending can you be to those that you're looking from whom you're looking to source your support? Right. And I'm looking at this New York Post article and I'm reading directly out of it. Quote, Willis pointed out during her speech that the other two prosecutors assigned to the case, Anna Greencross and John Floyd, both are white, and noted that allegations have only emerged targeting the two prominent black members of the prosecution, her and Wade.
Well, you're banging each other, Fani.
Yeah, here's the deal. Yeah, only one of you are capable of awarding $654,000 of legal work to the person that you're going to the Caribbean with, and also known to be a romantic partner with. I don't know how that has to do anything to do with race, except for the fact that you're the leading prosecutor on this case. You're in the headlines. You ran for this position based on your willingness to take on this case specifically, and you're in a position to award money to outside law firms that are taxpayer funded. This has nothing to do with
a radical thought, Fani. When you were picking your all-star dream team to prosecute Trump, maybe you shouldn't have picked the guy you were banging. Did that thought ever occur to you that people might think that's unseemly? Or did you think you could just play the race card and you'd get out of jail free? It doesn't work. Fani shot herself. Fani shot herself in the fanny. Hey, so let's sweep over to California. We'll talk more about Fani as events emerge. Let's talk about torts. Tort law. We don't talk enough about civil law in this show.
Yeah, we talk plenty about it. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's my view. I mean, I like criminal law. Give me a good old-fashioned murder every day of the week, and I'll be happy. But the California. So tort law. What is tort law? Tort law, personal injury law. Tort is a Latin term, means twisted. So behavior that is outside of the norm, behavior that for whatever reasons a society is unprepared to tolerate without recompense. That is what a tort is. And so we talk about the tort of negligence. We talk about the torts of defamation or breach of privacy. There are torts related to products liability, bringing to the market things that are inherently dangerous. There are design defect claims, and they're all there's a there are huge textbooks. It takes a semester in law school to get through just an overview of all the ways we can cause harm to one another and all the ways in which a person can seek compensation from another. But what every tort has in common is a failure to act, is an action that proximately, that is directly or nearly, causes injury to another person. And that can be as a result of an act you take. You punch somebody, that's an assault. Tell a lie that damages a person's reputation. These things cause damage to another. There are certain situations where the law imposes a duty to act for the benefit of another. And those are more troubling and more difficult claims because the duty to act, doesn't necessarily result in causation of harm to another person. But California is trying something new. I guess just last week, California introduced a new tort. In this regards, an entity called Gilead Science, which manufactures AIDS drugs, HIV drugs. And apparently, Gilead had in its labs a superior product that could have been used to treat HIV. And if this product had been brought to market and used, users would have suffered less risk of adverse consequences. And so the claim in the tort is that Gilead can be liable for not bringing a better product to market. This kind of stretches the theory of causation in effect to the breaking point, because when I don't know about you, but I'll have the television on, I'll be watching, usually it's a sporting event, and there'll be some drug. And if you take this drug, you've got the risk of your head falling off, your arms going numb, your legs your legs breaking, and your penis and suddenly inverting and becoming a vaginal. But nonetheless, this thing will make you feel a lot better, but you should talk to your doctor about these risks. And I'm like, who's going to want to take that? The danger, it's not foreseeable who, as an individual consumer, will be adversely harmed. But it's foreseeable that some individuals will. That's the point of these adverse consequences. In the Gilead case, the court's saying, well, the hell with that analysis. Gilead had begun research. Gilead had begun to develop a product. And when it didn't bring it to market, it did two things wrong. First, it didn't bring it to market because it was profiting from the item that was already on the market, and it wanted to take those monies. But second, it deprived individuals of less exposure to an adverse consequence. Now, this is disturbingly related to a difficult concept in proof of damages in tort law called loss of a chance. There's the loss of a chance doctrine. How do you say that a person's been harmed by someone's act? You can say, well, he punched me and I bled, or he held me and I lost the chance to go and get treatment. That would be a sort of kidnapping type theory. In the Gilead case, I think what the court is saying is that consumers lost the chance to not suffer adverse consequences when Gilead didn't bring this act or this claim to market. But who are those consumers? And so, it's a difficult tort claim because it relieves the plaintiff's bar of the necessity of having a person who's actually been injured by the actual acts of an actual defendant, and permits them to basically, I guess on a class action basis, say, if you were taking a Gilead pharmaceutical, you could have taken a better one. And because you could have taken a better one, therefore you were harmed. I mean, Mike, it makes my head hurt spinning this out. And I'm not sure where the suit lands.
Well, so this is a product liability, I guess, flavor of negligence. So we've talked about negligence before, and I think that was what you were describing earlier, not torts broadly, but negligence is an action within the larger torts framework. So there are intentional torts, and then there's negligence, and typically civil litigators, what is plaintiffs' attorneys or ambulance chasers, their bread and butter is negligence, right? They have this system of duty, breach, causation, damages, and I've said this before. Any analysis for negligence presupposes damages. It has to you must have damages to start the analysis, even though it's the last element within that causal framework. If you don't have any damages, you're going to be hard pressed to do all this other work and then show that somebody else owes you money for or other recompense for some sort of duty or breach thereof. In this context, products liability gets really technical, right? And in the case of pharmaceuticals, we are talking about products liability. But what I've got on the screen is the case, right? Because what we've promised you is that if we're going to report on a case that the news is reporting on, we'll go and we'll find it for you. So this case originates out of California. The decision came from the Court of Appeal in the First District of California. So you can find it if you want the case site. It's A1655558. And you can just throw that in. You can Google search, Court of Appeal for the state of California. Pretty easy to get there. Anyway, and this was on January 9th. So if you're looking at that, like within the last 100 hours, this decision came down in excess of 100 hours ago. So you will have to search for this specifically. Norm, I think there's one paragraph within all of this that is really helpful to what you were just saying, right? So it says, quote, in the introductory paragraph, kind of talking about how the court concluded and on what decisions or on what issues, it says, although plaintiffs are seeking compensation for injuries caused by their use of TDF, which is the original 2001 drug from Gilead that was approved, they do not assert any claim seeking to prove that TDF is defective. So number one, what did I just say about damages, right? Duty breach causation damages. So the court acknowledges that while the plaintiff class is suing for damage related to their use of the underlying approved drug, they're not suing on a theory that asserts in a product's liability framework, right, that the product itself was in any way defective. In other words, they're agreeing that the product it performs as intended and as expected, right? So that's an important starting framework for this suit. Instead, they characterize their claim as one for ordinary negligence, right? So products liability is a more specific form of negligence. Ordinary negligence is garden variety, right? Duty, breach, causation, damages. Contending that Gilead's decision to defer development of TAF, the later drug, to maximize its profits, breached its duty of reasonable care to users of TDF. They also assert a claim for fraudulent concealment, reasoning that Gilead had a duty to disclose information about TAF to users of TDF. So, in a nutshell, this lawsuit is as follows, Norm. Hey, we, the plaintiff class, do not assert that the drug that we have used is in any way defective. In fact, it performs just as intended. So any of the side effects, harm on our kidneys or liver or whatever else, we acknowledge that those were foreseeable risks. But the greater weight of us taking this drug led us to that. But what we are saying is that there was a better drug that the same company developed and they slow rolled it into the market that could have had less deleterious effects on our other organs. And because of that, we reasoned that they did that because they had too much invested in the 2001 drug. They wanted to recoup it, and they fraudulently concealed the information that would have led the public to demand them to roll it out faster. That's what the court is ruling on in this context.
I hear you. I did the fraudulent concealment thing seems to lay waste the trade secrets doctrine. I mean, basically, companies bring to market products for their own reasons when they're ready to bring it to market. Do they have a general duty to disclose the status of research of products in the making? And I look at
you're asking the right questions. You're asking the right questions. To me, this is silly because ultimately, what it's saying to consumers everywhere, and I believe that the ultimate holding in this court is not necessarily that Gilead is guilty of anything. In fact, what they've done is grant and rule on this case to send certain things back down to the lower court. But also they removed a grant of summary judgment in the petitioner's favor against Gilead, right? But what they've done is outline an additional narrow exception, I think, to the products liability framework for negligence. So this is a long suit, but ultimately, Norm, I think what you're getting at is really important is that are you trying to open it feels very socialist at its core, right? That we're going to open source innovation of drugs, but also but somehow incentivize these companies to make these substantial investments into the care that we want them to invest. Those two things to me do not really live in the same world. Now, there's plenty of room in between.
The Wall Street Journal had a humorous editorial on this. It basically said this suit illustrates that the only industry that's really
that's right.
California is really friendly is the plaintiff's bar in the personal injury bar. I mean, I find the litigation sort of amazing in that it relieves the duty to prove proximate cause. And when I look at this, though, I think, man, everybody that's got something to say about COVID, about ivermectin, about treatments for COVID incident to 2020, every pharmaceutical company in the country is now going to face litigation with respect to this legal theory in California. And if you had a better drug, why didn't you market it? What drugs do you have that we don't know about? Because if you're going to recognize fraudulent concealment, that implies a duty to disclose. And at what point, at what stage of development is that duty to disclose triggered? I note, Mike, that this is from the California Appellate Court. I presume it can go up to the California Supreme Court for further review. And it seems to me that's what's going to be necessary. Very odd ruling. It's worth noting. Tort law is developed by courts. It's there can be statutory exceptions, but this is some forward thinking in the views of some, fantasy land in the views of others. But it's the California Supreme Court taking traditional personal injury law and applying it in a unique way. Let's see what happens.
Dawn asks, would this relate to the claim that drug companies suppress the efficacy and availability of COVID therapeutics to allow emergency authorization of the vaccine?
110%, yes.
Yeah. And so that is the fraudulent concealment aspect. But in the case of HIV therapeutics, we're not under some sort of emergency circumstances, or at
Fair enough.
least no
Great
one's arguing that we are right now.
Oh,
And
that's a great.
those
That's a
people
great distinction.
also aren't in government. Anyway, Dawn,
That's,
good
I mean,
connection.
Robert F. Kennedy's book on this topic is pretty persuasive, and that is that that suppression of alternative remedies were necessary in order to serve as a factual predicate for emergency certification. And that's one reason that ivermectin and whatnot was jumped on so quickly, so that the vaccines could be rolled out to the public without the requisite testing, given the emergency that we faced at the time.
Well, and speaking of
Um,
RFK Jr., I just want to observe before we close up, Norm, that his position is that that tort reform should include the removal of vaccine manufacturers from that sort of exemption list to be sued in tort by those that are harmed by the therapeutics. I think the plaintiffs are sort of impliedly making that case here. No, because ultimately, if we want companies to be incentivized to bring their best products to market within the narrow veins of a certain issue or issue that they're attempting to mitigate or solve, right? So that would actually lead Gilead naturally into the secondary drug that they're claiming would have less harmful side effects than the initial one, right? But Gilead itself probably knows that it's immune from certain types of lawsuits from the public. So I think that may be the broader issue to explore here, because I do think that RFK Jr. is correct.
Yeah, I think you're right. Hey, InfoBear, we love having you as a listener, but I don't even know what the hell you're talking about. Please be a spiritual leader and not a keyboard warrior. Okay. Take action, share the truth. Well, we're trying to share it as we see it and know it here every day. And above all, become a spiritual beacon and help guide others to the truth. I'd do it if I knew how, but I don't. And all I have are the feet of clay and unclean lips that I was born with. And I agree, a narcissist always dies because of service to self. You've heard us talk about Augustine before here. Sin is love of the wrong thing. And when we love ourselves and we become pots saying to the potter, why makest me thus, we become the example of sin. And so I think a call to righteousness is very well in order. Very, very well in order, InfoBear. Thanks for the nudge. Hey, Mike, isn't there a new publication online today that people should be flocking to subscribe to? And what is it?
So if you subscribe to our newsletter at lawpoddaily.com, the first installment of that weekly newsletter is in your inbox as of 7:45 a.m. Eastern time this morning. And it is a brief introduction, an expression of gratitude from Norm and myself for signing up and for taking part. A promise to continue within our realm of competence to evolve this capacity, and then also an offering from Norm's latest selection. I titled it "Government is a Mystery," but you should go and read that and understand why I titled it "Government is a Mystery." I can lay claim to nothing other than the title alone. Norm did all of the heavy lifting on the intellectual front with that. And what we've promised as well is that essay will be published to the website. But I believe, Norm, we're going to start just offering our subscribers via the newsletter exclusive access to things when they go live, and then we will later stream these essays and publish them to the website thereafter, just to incentivize people getting the latest stuff that we're offering into the ether first. buying through the website, buying through the newsletter, and buying through Law Pod Daily, the live stream. So yeah, that's there, please. And if you didn't get it this morning, I think I saw one subscription that may have come in after the fact, or at least, early in the morning, that was not added to that list. I'll add that to the list here later, but do go and subscribe. It's free. At least we have not unlocked any tiers for subscription as of yet, and I'm sure we will in the future. But it talks a little bit about what we're doing as well, Norm, the fact that the live streams will continue, that the essays will continue, and that you have actually just put together the first installment in Every Man's Con Law, that project that we'll be working on throughout the year.
Very good. Well, listen, folks, thanks for tuning in. Spread the word. We're here. We do mean to dominate your space, the intellectual space between folks' ears, because we think that there is a moral, political, and spiritual vacuum in the country. We don't necessarily know how to fill it, but we can certainly point to it and make our efforts, and we encourage you to make yours. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, everybody. 8 a.m. You know how to find us. YouTube, X, Rumble. And if you don't catch us live, you can always find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, Audible, wherever you find premium podcasts. Norm, have a good Monday. I'm looking out for snow here in beautiful Greensboro, North Carolina. See everybody. I don't know where your sound went. Anyway, see y'all.